Hello everyone, my name is Martin and you're watching Affinity for Commander. In today's video we have an epic 4-way battle between 3 legendary artificers and an angry corrupted elemental. How exciting! But before we begin, I'd like to thank all of our incredible patrons for their unwavering generosity and support. You guys really are the best. Also, if you decide to make any purchase from any of these websites, then be sure to do so through our affiliate links in the video description. It won't cost you any extra, but it really helps out the channel. And if you haven't already, then don't forget to check out our latest sponsor, altersleeves.com. They have a huge variety of alternative artwork sleeves for your favourite commanders, and the quality of these products are absolutely stunning. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Feldon of the Third Path Reanimator deck, which aims to discard high power creatures and then make token copies of them. I also run a fair amount of mana rocks just to flat out cast my huge spells should anything happen to my commander or graveyard. I keep an opening hand containing Cathartic Reunion, Gilded Lotus, Conquering Manticore, Spine Rock Null, Phyrexia's Core and 2 mountains.
I am playing my Urza Lord High Artificer artifact deck, which looks to make the most out of this original Planeswalker's ability to tap robots for mana. I also run a few cheeky combos in the deck, as well as some high synergy artifact interaction cards. I start the game with an opening hand consisting of Lotus Bloom, Sapphire Medallion, Psy Master Thopterist, Phyrexian Metamorph, and 3 islands.
Hugo is playing his Yarok the Desecrated ETB Matters deck, which focuses on getting as much value as possible out of permanents coming onto the board. From landfall to destroy effects, this elemental horror is certainly a force to be reckoned with. His opening hand is made up of Swan Song, Lotus Cobra, Nature's Law, Circuitous Maze, Acidic Slime, Exotic Orchard, and a Forest.
And finally, Terrence is playing his Glacian Powerstone Engineer and the Prismatic Piper Box of Rocks deck, with the Hideous Flute Fanatic's only purpose being to grant Terrence access to white. The deck is designed to get as many mana rocks into play as possible, and then use all that mana to win in some way. Honestly, I'm not really sure what his win condition is beyond trolling us to death with his suboptimal commanders. Anyway, Terrence's opening hand consists of Mana Crypt, Mind Stone, Mystic Forge, Wrath of God, Salvage Station, Glacial Fortress, and Inventor's Fair.
Hugo wins the die roll, plays a forest, and passes to Alex.
I play an island and pass.
In my turn I play Spine Rock Null, and exile one of the top 4 cards of my library beneath it. With nothing more to do, I end my turn.
Terrence plays Glacial Fortress and passes to Hugo.
Hugo plays Exotic Orchard and taps out to cast Nature's Law. He searches his library for Overgrown Tomb, puts the line into play tapped, and passes the turn.
I play another island and cast an old school Sapphire Medallion. Not yet finished, I suspend an equally retro looking Lotus Bloom and end my turn.
I play a mountain and tap out to cast Cathartic Reunion. I discard Kozilek, the Great Distortion, and Conquering Manticore to the spell's effect, draw 3 cards, and pass to Terrence.
Terrence plays Seat of the Synod and casts Mind Stone. Unable to cast anything else, he passes the turn.
Hugo plays a forest and casts Circuitous Route.
My word, this boy is ramping hard today.
He searches his library for a swamp and an island, puts them both into play tapped, and ends his turn.
I begin my turn by removing a time counter from my Lotus, and then play an island. Next I cast Psy Master Thopterist, and then pass to Martin.
I play a mountain and cast my commander, Feldon of the Third Path. Out of mana, I pass the turn.
Terrence plays a Plains and casts Mana Crypt. He then taps out to cast one of his commanders, Glacian Powerstone Engineer, and ends his turn.
Hugo starts his turn by casting his commander, Yarok the Desecrated. He then plays an island, casts Lotus Cobra, and passes to Alex.
I remove the penultimate time counter from my suspended Lotus Bloom, Plain Island, and pay 2 life to help cast Phyrexian Metamorph. I had the Shapeshifter enter as a copy of Yarok, create a 1/1 Thopter with Size ability, and pass to Martin.
I start my turn by playing Sanctum of Ugin and then activate my commander's activated ability. I make a token copy of Kozilek the Great Distortion that's in my graveyard, move to combat, and attack Alex with the hasty Eldrazi Titan. Not wanting to lose his Thopter Producer or Yarok clone, Alex decides not to block, taking the 12 damage. Happy with my turn, I sacrifice my Tentacle Terror in my end step and pass.
In the absence of a coin, Terrence rolls a die for his Mana Crypt's trigger, which he loses, taking 3 damage. He then plays Inventor's Fair, casts Mystic Forge, and ends his turn.
Hugo begins his turn by casting Shared Summons. He searches his library for Nyx Bloom Ancient and Agent of Treachery, puts both creatures into his hand, and then plays a Forest. This triggers his Lotus Cobra twice thanks to Yarok generating him 2 additional mana, which he uses to help cast Acidic Slime. Hugo targets Sapphire Medallion with the slime's first ETB trigger, and Alex responds to this by sacrificing the medallion and his Thopter to Size ability, drawing himself a card. Hugo then targets Alex's Robotic Yarok with the Acidic Slime's second trigger, showing the importance of letting someone declare all their targets before responding.
I was hoping Hugo would forget that my Shapeshifter was an artifact.
Not yet finished, Hugo decides to kick Alex whilst he's down and attacks him with Yarok. Alex declares no blocks, taking 3 damage, and Hugo passes the turn to him.
I remove the final time counter from Lotus Bloom, cast the artifact, and create a 1/1 Thopter with Sigh. I then play a 5th land and tap 4 to cast my commander, the big man himself, Urza, Lord High Artificer. The Artificer enters with a Construct token, who is currently a 3/3, and I pass the turn.
I play a mountain, cast Sol Ring, and activate Feldon's ability to once again make an artifact copy of Kozilek the Great Distortion. Moving to combat, I apologise to Terrence for what I'm about to do, and then attack him with my Eldrazi. Given that Kozilek has Menace, Terrence is unable to block it with his single creature, and takes a hefty 12 damage.
Ouch.
I then move to my second main phase where I activate my Hideaway Lands ability, casting the It that betrays that I exiled with it oh so long ago, and causing a reasonable amount of panic from the rest of the table.
People say my deck is scary.
With the Eldrazi on the stack, I sacrifice Sanctum of Ugin, searching my library for Wormcoil Engine and put the Robotic Worm into my hand. Pleased with my turn, I move to my end step where I sacrifice my Kozilek clone, and Terrence responds by activating Glacian's ability. He taps 3 artifacts to look at the top 3 cards of his library, puts one of them into his hand and the others into his graveyard before proceeding to his turn.
Terrence once again takes 3 damage for his Mana Crypt, gains 1 from Inventor's Fair, and casts Wrath of God. I respond to this by tapping 2 of my artifacts for mana with Urza's ability, and then sacrifice both my artifact creatures to draw a card with Size ability. With no further interruptions, the board wipe resolves, and Terrence casts Mirage Mirror. He then plays Scavenger Grounds and passes to Hugo.
In his turn, Hugo casts Nyx Bloom Ancient, tripling the amount of mana at his disposal.
That card is ridiculous.
It really is. Keeping 1 land and 3 mana open, he passes the turn.
I start my turn by paying 2 life to cast Gadexian Probe, targeting Hugo. I take a sneaky peek at the contents of his hand, draw a card, and cast Tezzeret, Artifice Master. I activate the Planeswalker's +1 ability, creating a 1/1 Thopter token, play Darksteel Citadel, and end my turn.
I play Phyrexia's Call, recast my commander, and pass to Terrence.
Terrence does not take any damage from his Mana Vault this turn, gains 1 life from Inventor's Fair, and plays a very sparkly Reliquary Tower. Next he activates his Mirror's ability, having it become a copy of Nyx Bloom Ancient until the end of turn, and casts Search for Azcanta. Not yet finished, Terrence casts a Skull Clamp on top of his library thanks to his Forge, followed by the Chromatic Lantern that was next in his library.
Now that is a funky card art.
Like something out of a fever dream. Still not finished, Terrence recasts Glacian, equips his Skull Clamp to him, and passes the turn.
Hugo begins his turn by casting Agent of Treachery, gaining control of Terrance's mirror with the Rogue's ETB. He then has the mirror become a copy of his elemental, meaning that each of his lands now tap for 9 times the mana that they should do.
Oh, that is absolutely ridiculous.
Next, Hugo recasts his commander, casts Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and with ample mana to spare, casts Hostage Taker. He exiles Feldon and Alex's Thopter with the Pirate's ETB, casts my commander, and moves to combat. Here Hugo attacks Tezzeret with Nyx Bloom Ancient, lowering his loyalty to 1, and then ends his turn.
I play an island and activate Tezzeret's 0 ability, drawing a card.
If only you had one more artifact.
Ugh, don't remind me. Anyway, with nothing more to do, I pass to Martin.
7 lands untapped? Now that is certainly suspicious.
It's fine, don't worry about it.
In my turn, I play a mountain and then cast Ulamog's Crusher.
With Annihilator? Ew.
You'll want to talk. Out of mana, I pass the turn, and Terrance responds by paying 1 life to exile a top card of his library with Mystic Forge. He then cycles Irrigated Farmland, drawing a card, and proceeds to his turn.
Terrance loses his die roll, taking 3 damage, and gains a life from his fair. He then puts the land on top of his library into his graveyard with Search for Azcanta trigger, but chooses not to transform the enchantment at this time. Next, Terrance activates his commander's ability, tapping 5 artifacts to put one of the top 5 cards of his library into his hand and the other 4 into his graveyard. Still not finished, Terrance casts Transmogrifying Wand and then activates the artifact targeting Nyx Bloom Ancient. The elemental is destroyed and is replaced with a 2/4 Ox token with Impressive Facial Hair.
He must ask you a question, Alex.
With nothing more to do, Terrance ends his turn.
Hugo starts his turn by activating Feldon's ability, creating a robotic copy of the acidic slime in his graveyard. He destroys Terrance's Mystic Forge and Transmogrifying Wand for the Ooze's 2 ETB triggers, upsetting him greatly, and then moves to combat. Here Hugo attacks Tezzeret with his Goat and Dryad, and Terrance with Agent of Treachery and Hostage Taker. Surprising literally no one, Alex responds to this by casting an overloaded Cyclonic Rift, but Hugo counters the spell with a cheeky swan song.
And I would have gone away with it too, who weren't a few darn kids with your ability to turn my Cyclonic Rift into a bird.
Alex becomes the lucky new owner of a 2/2 bird token, and combat damage then occurs. Alex declares no blocks, Tezzeret's loyalty is reduced to 0, and Terrance takes 5 damage. In his post-combat main phase, Hugo plays Woodland Cemetery and passes to Alex.
I play a Myriad Landscape and pass the turn.
Will you stop leaving so much mana open? It makes me nervous. In my turn, I play a mountain and then move to combat. Here I attack Hugo with my Crusher, and he sacrifices his Ox and Agent of Treachery to the Annihilator trigger. Hugo then declares no blocks, taking 8 damage, and I proceed to my second main phase. Here I cast Gilded Lotus, which I then use to help cast Meteor Golem, targeting Feldon with the creature's ETB. The old man is returned to my command zone, and with nothing more to do, I end my turn.
Terrance doesn't take any damage from his Crypt, gains a life from Inventor's Fair, and chooses not to mill a card with Search for Azcanta. He then decides that now is the right time to flip his enchantment, transforming it into Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. Terrance then casts Hedron Archive and passes to Hugo.
Hugo begins his turn by casting Rampaging Baelofts, which is truly a formidable card with double landfall triggers.
Indeed it is.
Happy with his play, Hugo ends his turn, to which Alex responds by casting Whir of Invention, where X is 4. He searches his library for Endless Atlas as he apparently really needs to draw some cards, and proceeds to his turn.
In my turn, I draw a card with my newly acquired Atlas, and then recast my commander. The construct he creates enters as a 4/4 thanks to my 3 other artifacts, and I pass to Martin.
I start my turn by recasting Feldon, and then use my remaining mana to cast Clone Shell. I exile one of the top 4 cards of my library with the Shapeshifter's ability, put the rest in the bottom of my library, and move to combat. Here I once again attack Hugo with my Eldrazi, and he sacrifices Dryad of the Elysian Grove and a Forest to the Annihilator trigger.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, Annihilator is mean.
Hugo decides not to block, taking 8 damage, and with nothing more to do, I pass the turn. Terence responds to this by activating Glacian's ability, this time tapping 4 artifacts. He looks at the top 4 cards of his library, puts one of them into his hand, and puts the remaining 3 into his graveyard. Not quite finished, Terence activates Azcanta, once again looking at the top 4 cards of his library. He reveals one of them to be Paradoxical Outcome, puts the rest in the bottom of his library, and moves to his turn.
Terence succeeds on his mana crypt check and once again gains a life from Inventor's Fair. He then taps all of his mana rocks, floating a bunch of mana, and casts the Paradoxical Outcome he put into his hand moments ago. Terence returns all 4 of his tapped artifacts and his Skull Clamp to his hand, draws 5 cards, and then casts Cataclysmic Gearhulk.
Now that is a synergistic play.
The construct resolves, and Terence mistakenly sacrifices his Seat of the Synod to the Gearhulk's ETB.
Such a crying shame.
Hugo sacrifices his Hostage Taker and Rampaging Baloths. I sacrifice my Lotus Bloom, Construct, and Darksteel Citadel.
Another Gearhulk related misplay there.
And finally, Martin sacrifices his Soul Ring, Meteor Golem, Ulamog's Crusher, and Clone Shell. He reveals the card that he exiled with Clone Shell to be a mountain, which stays in exile, and Terence plays an island. Next, Terence casts Ethereum Sculptor, recast Skull Clamp, recast Mana Vault, and recast Mind Stone. Still not finished, he recasts Chromatic Lantern, and finally ends his turn.
In his turn, Hugo casts Forehaven Elf, searches his library for 2 islands, and puts them into play tapped. Happy with his play, Hugo passes to Alex with a bunch of untapped lands.
Hey wait, only I'm allowed to do that. I play a Seat of the Synod and then cast everyone's favourite Gondola Steering Ghost, Deadeye Navigator. I had the Spirit Soulborn with Urza when he enters the battlefield, and with no further plays, pass the turn.
I begin my turn by activating Feldon's ability, making a token copy of the It That Betrays in my graveyard. Moving to combat, I attack Alex with my Robotic Eldrazi, and he responds by flickering Urza with Deadeye Navigator. This makes him a construct which he sacrifices along with an island to my creature's Annihilator trigger. I put the island into play under my control thanks to It That Betrays ability, and Alex declares no blocks, taking 11 damage.
What can I say? I like to live dangerously.
Moving to my post-combat main phase, I cast the Wormcoil engine that I tutored for oh so long ago, and end my turn. As usual, Terence responds to this by tapping his commander and 4 artifacts, putting one of the top 4 cards of his library into his hand. He puts the rest into his graveyard, and then moves to his turn.
Terence succeeds on his Mana Crypt die roll and gains a life with Inventor's Fair. He then plays a Plains, casts Unwinding Clock, and recasts Hedron Archive. Not yet finished, he casts a super cool looking Commander Sphere, followed by Folio of Fancies.
That's a lot of artifacts he has.
With nothing more to do, Terence passes to Hugo.
Terence untaps all of his artifacts in Hugo's untap step, and Hugo casts Peregrine Drake. He untaps the 5 lands that he used to cast the Drake of its first trigger, taps 5 lands to float 5 mana, and untaps the lands of his creature's second trigger.
There's no mana, like free mana.
Hugo then uses 2 of his floating mana to make Mirage Mirror a copy of Folio of Fancies, and pays 10 mana to the book to have everybody draw 5 cards.
How generous of him.
Not yet finished, Hugo casts Tireless Tracker, and then plays an island. He makes 2 clues with the Tracker's ability thanks to Yarok's trigger doubling effects, and Hugo passes the turn. Terence responds to this by having everybody draw 3 cards with the original Folio of Fancies, and Alex proceeds to his turn.
I play Cephalid Colosseum and then flicker my commander, creating myself a shiny new construct token. Next I cast Isochrom Scepter, imprinting the classic dramatic reversal beneath it. Nobody's able to prevent this from happening, and I flicker my commander once again, creating myself yet another construct. I then tap both my construct and my Atlas to produce 3 blue mana and use 2 of it to untap them all with my Scepter's ability. I repeat this process over and over to generate infinite blue mana, which I then use in conjunction with Urza's ability to exile my entire library and cast Laboratory Maniac. In response to this, Terrence taps his folio to make everybody draw a card, and I desperately search my library for a way to stop this.
Please tell me you don't have one. This would be a hilarious way for you to lose.
Unable to find a way to counter the activated ability, I instead cast Stroke of Genius, having Terrence draw 1 billion cards. Unable to do this, Terrence is knocked out of the game, and the Folio of Fancy's trigger fizzles from existence.
Okay, I do have to admit that is certainly a creative way of resolving your issue.
With Terrence out of the picture, my wizard resolves, and I tap my Atlas to draw a card, winning the game with a Maniac's alternative win condition.
Well, that's it for another game. I hope that you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed playing it. Don't forget that you can help to support the channel in 4 quick and easy ways: liking this video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. And if you really like us, then you could consider becoming a patron of the channel, where you can find rewards such as custom tokens and playmats for as little as $1 a month. That's all for now though, we'll see you next time. Stay awesome!